is irreversible and can't be broken. It's encrypted. And so let's just start with some relevant use cases. Everybody knows about the painting. This is what really, believe it or not, NFTs actually existed for years before March of last year. But for all intents and purposes, this industry began last March when the artist Mike Winkelmann, aka Beeple, sold his painting for $69 million. A couple of fun facts about this. Number one, I read that before this, he had never sold a print work for more than $100. But he had been working on this piece for many, many years. This is a compilation. It's a collage of many, many of his pieces. He actually started selling NFTs based on this previously and made considerable money. But in March, it was the highly publicized sale for $69 million. He instantly became one of the world's most valuable living artists. And the NFT market really was created overnight with a frenzy. And I also read recently something interesting, which is the buyer who purchased this, obviously he was a professional crypto blockchain person. They actually took this piece and they were able to monetize it by selling other pieces of it afterwards. So this was very much not just something that they were going to buy and hold and put on their wall as a piece of digital art. This was very much an asset that they were looking to monetize and make even more money through some fancy financial workings. So that's the most famous one, but let's talk about a lot of different use cases. So again, the painting, the Beeple painting is the best example of digital art, but the NFT asset class has really been a revelation for artists because they are finally able to monetize their digital works in a very real way. And what do I mean by that? So the NFT process is you can take a piece of art that's digital. You then have someone tokenize it to make it encrypted with blockchain. And that piece of art can then be sold on a platform like OpenSea or one of the other platforms. And again, that's really revolutionized the art industry. But there's so many other use cases besides art. There's fashion. There's a legal benefit to fashion, which is that it helps authenticate ownership, which certainly helps with counterfeits in the supply chain. But as you'll see in a few slides from now, fashion companies have really embraced NFTs and have used it as another marketing and sales vehicle with luxury brands, and I'll give you some examples. Certainly sports and collectibles, and we'll see that. And gaming. So video gaming is really, for the last 6 months or so, been one of the hottest areas of NFT sales, as a lot of video games are built around the acquisition and use of NFTs. There are many very, very popular games that require you to have NFTs, and once you do that, you can play to earn in the game. So it's actually a way to derive revenue from that, and I'll show you an example of that too. So here are just some examples of notable NFT use cases for sports and collectibles. Tom Brady, who can seemingly do no wrong, has now aligned himself with this new platform called Autograph, where they're going to be selling very high-end sports memorabilia and collectibles. The first of the major sports NFT platforms was NBA Top Shot, and that was a way to buy and sell video clips, right? So you'd have LeBron James dunking a basketball. I remember when this craze first started, I was, like everyone else, initially skeptical. And I went online and I basically went to YouTube and I basically took the same video that was on sale and I texted it to my son and I said, congratulations, here's a video that people are now paying, hundreds of thousands of dollars for. That's all true, right? Any of us could take a screenshot of the Beeple painting and we could put it on our wall. But that misses the point entirely, right? The value is in the scarcity. So that true one owner of something there's lots of benefits to that, right? Number one, it's an asset. It's an asset that can go up in value. Not at the moment, but the hope is that in the future it does. And number two, there just is a certain value in scarcity, which has been the basis of the collectibles market forever. It's why baseball cards have been bought and sold, or rare coins, or rare stamps. There is a value to uniqueness, so there's very much an intrinsic value to being the only one of something, or one of 100, or one of 1,000, or, as we'll see with Bored Ape, one of 10,000. That's the value. The value is the scarcity. The toy industry has made large uses of NFTs. This Ninja Turtles is just one example. This was a worldwide drop for one of their ninja characters that happened last year. It was an incredibly popular revenue-generating event, and for the most part, the revenue that these companies are getting is purely additive, because if you are aligning yourself with a platform, as I'll describe in a few minutes when we get into the legal discussion, there's typically no upfront cost to you. The costs are borne by the platform, and you're getting a percentage of the revenue. So like with traditional licensing, the beauty of the business model is after creation, there's very little cost involved for the content owner. It's basically passive profit income. Here are just some examples of fashion. Nike has made a very large push with its Crypto Kicks collection. This one item sold for $130,000 earlier this year. A lot of luxury companies have done this, and they really do it in two ways. They do it as a pure NFT, or they do it in conjunction with an actual product that's purchased. So you could see Versace or Gucci doing a $10,000 handbag and the NFT. And early in the process, the really interesting part was the value was in the NFT, not the bag. People were buying it because of the NFT, and it was almost like the bag was the afterthought. So luxury companies have embraced it, as well as commodity brands like Nike and other apparel companies. So NFTs in music have been really successful. Bands like Kings of Leon, they've dropped albums on NFT platforms. And what you hear from bands and recording artists is, number one, it's a way for them to generate significantly more revenue, right? They get very little revenue from their music being played on Spotify. They get a lot of revenue from touring, and now they get a lot of revenue from NFTs. And it's also a way for them to offer something exclusive. And I remember years ago, the band Radiohead tried something really unique. This must have been 10 or 15 years ago. They offered an album online, and they actually said, you can pay whatever you want for it, right? It was the first time I remembered a band doing a direct download. So fast forward now, 10 or 15 years, the same thing is happening with NFTs, except now there's going to be a limited number, right? So they're creating scarcity and exclusivity, and that's going to drive up the value for their true fans. And every band, every recording artist has a core set of really, true fans who will pay a lot. So it's really a way for the recording artist to connect with their fans in a unique way. There have been lots of examples. Snoop Dogg has made great use of NFTs. And there's lots of different ways that NFTs come into play. It's not just buying a unique song. It could be fractional ownership of an album or a song. I've seen that publicized a lot recently. Recording artists, you can buy a percentage of actually the future royalty stream, so that you are directly buying into the recording artist's revenue pool from that song. So there's a lot of different use cases for music in NFTs. Video games, extremely popular with NFTs. As I said, this is an example, Axie, of a game that has embedded NFTs as part of the gameplay. It's basically Pokemon with NFT ownership. You do have to buy the NFT, but the benefit is, number one, it's an asset that can be sold later if the value goes up. And number two, this is one of those examples of a play-to-learn game where you can actually generate more money from gameplay based on ownership of the NFT. So these are just some of the really thousands of examples of NFT use cases across all the different industries that are highly relevant to why we're all here at this conference, which is licensing. Just a minute on the various marketplaces. I mentioned OpenSea. It's by far the largest. It's gotten criticism recently because there were some very highly publicized hacks. Personally, I also find it a little overwhelming. There's just too much on OpenSea. There's basically they have everything on there. They don't really discriminate on what's put up in a way that would allow users to really find what they're looking for easily. But a lot of these other ones are much more focused. Mintable, I think, is the Mark Cuban platform that's doing really well. And NBA Top Shot I mentioned. So a year ago, most of these didn't even exist, right? So we can only imagine a year or two from now how many are going to be launched. And as I mentioned, these are platforms for the most part that are selling NFTs of everyone. There's really a movement in place now for brand owners and companies to do their own organic, dedicated NFT sites for a very simple reason. They will generate much more revenue if they do it themselves versus essentially putting their licensed content up on any of these platforms. Here's another really interesting NFT use case that I'm sure many of you have heard about, the Bored Ape Yacht Club. I wish I could afford to be a member. At the beginning, you have to buy an NFT. You buy an NFT of one of the apes, and there's 10,000 of them. And it got a lot of publicity because celebrities like Justin Bieber and Steph Curry came on board. And so what it's become is this, we call it a closed community. You have to buy one of the NFTs, and it's basically a social club of NFTs, like the Soho House. If the Soho House were online, there are activities, events, and they are planning big in the future. We've just heard that they're going to make movies about the Bored Ape Yacht Club where the NFT owners can submit their characters to be incorporated into the film. So really the sky's the limit when it comes to something like this, and people are extremely creative about how to generate more revenue from something like this that's so unique and so sought after. But I can tell you, in case you're interested, I was on OpenSea this morning and I checked the prices, and they have come way down, as you would expect. So anybody who wants to get into Bored Ape, this might be the one time where it's actually affordable. So, since I am a lawyer, let me spend a few minutes talking like a lawyer, which is, what should you be thinking about if you are going to be entering the world of NFTs as a content owner? Now, I mentioned that there's really two ways to do it: to license your content to an NFT platform, or alternatively, to do your own organic site. Let's put that second one aside for the most part. Let's talk about if you're going to license your content to an NFT platform, what should you be thinking about? As I mentioned, these deals basically are licenses. You can take the traditional license and you can add new and different terms. Some of the things to think about is you are the IP owner when you create content. In whatever deal you're constructing, you want to make sure that you maintain IP ownership at every stage along the way. And it's funny because I'll read online in articles sometimes, people who buy these NFTs and they think, oh, I can just do anything I want with it. If I buy a character of Archie from Riverdale, I'm going to use it to make a movie out of it. Well, no, you're not. You don't have the creator rights because you buy NFTs. You have the right to buy and sell that as an asset. And that's it. You can't then exploit those rights in any kind of other works based on buying an NFT. Then, what is the scope of use of the licensed property? Are you going to be exclusive? I think Stu probably mentioned this. This is really a key in every relationship you have as a licensing professional. Are you going to give that platform exclusivity? It's, a pretty complex understanding. You might give them exclusivity for this particular content and then reserve for yourself everything else. Or you might give them exclusivity for only one part of that content. That's something you should be thinking about to make sure, as a brand content owner, you would prefer not to give exclusivity, because that would mean literally you could cut other deals with other platforms. Of course, the platforms don't like that because they don't want competition. That's always going to be a negotiation. So another key consideration is, what responsibilities are you going to put on the platform? As I mentioned, if you're an IP content owner, you have a digital image, let's say, or a video. That needs to be tokenized by someone. You don't want to incur the costs of doing that. So one thing you would negotiate with a platform is having them incur that. Basically, taking your digital image and turning it into an encrypted, tokenized digital image that's suitable for sale on a platform. And there's typically, when that's negotiated, there's not an extra cost for that. It's built into the economics of the financial terms that you're negotiating, which, as I'll say in a minute, is usually a percentage. How are you sharing the revenues? You're going to want some marketing obligation because, to be quite frank, a lot of the failures in the NFT drops that have happened in the past year, and there have been a lot of spectacular failures, many of them have come because of a failure of marketing. And it's not just marketing in general, it's marketing to the right type of consumer. And that really depends on what the opportunity is. If you're selling a piece of fine art, that's going to be very different from doing a sneaker drop or doing a music drop. You have to build in marketing to the right type of consumer, or no one's going to know it's there. So then compensation, always a critical factor, and it's always the question we get. So when I want to negotiate these deals, the client said, what are we going to get out of this? So it's rare nowadays, unless you are a A-list brand, a top brand, it's rare to get something you would have typically gotten in the traditional merchandise license, which is advance money or guarantees. That's tough to get. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. What you're more likely to get is just a standard revenue sharing arrangement. And deals that we've negotiated have been much more generous to the content owner than a traditional license. I'm not sure Stu mentioned exactly what royalty rates are, but for the traditional merchandise licensing agreement, taking a brand, making apparel, or making handbags, depending on who you are, you're going to get 6 to 8%, maybe 10% if you're one of the studios, or even a little more. Amazingly, in this NFT world, it's much more equitable and fair. We've negotiated many deals where it's been 50-50, so the content owner gets 50% of the revenue generated from the first sale, and then additional revenue from all secondary sales. And the beauty of that is, when this, let's say it's a piece of art, when that's tokenized, you now have an ability to track that forever. So every time it's sold again, you can build into your contract as the content owner that you get revenue. It's a lot smaller on these secondary resales, but 10% give or take is typically fair. And it is just substantial revenue that's trailing and passive for the content owner that theoretically could go on perpetually. So those are the real financial and deal terms that you should be thinking about in a licensing relationship. So again, just some stats. It's been a rough month for NFTs. The market's down 92% from its peak. The valuations are way down. I read online that the famous Jack Dorsey tweet that sold for like millions at the beginning sold for pennies on that recently. For those people who invested, it's a sad time. But again, I'm an optimist. It's early. This market is evolving. It needs to get better. They need to figure out the payment systems, especially because requiring people to only buy with Ethereum or one of its competitors is very limiting, right? If they allowed people to buy with dollars or other currencies, I think you'd see the pool of buyers increase exponentially. So there are certainly ways to improve the system that's going to happen over time. But, like I said about the internet in 2000, it didn't go away. So let's spend just a few minutes talking about